Every year I know we gonna go hard. We been that team ever since Bart started. All my cheese heads go pack go. Ain't showing no mercy, cutting no slack, no. I ain't a bad sport and I'll even wish you good luck. Only thing I will.
Good morning and welcome into Lombardi's Legends podcast on a beautiful Saturday morning. As always, I am Wags, joined by my co-host Dane. Dane, how you doing this morning as we're ramping up for week 15 already of the NFL season? We're able to do this here on a Saturday morning. The Packers are headed to Seattle for another primetime matchup on Sunday Night Football. But how are you doing here on this fine Saturday morning?
Wags, good morning. I can't believe it's already, we're talking week 15. This year's just flying by. It's always a pleasure talking Packers with you. And yeah, I mean, I'm feeling pretty good. Obviously a disappointing loss to Detroit. We've been playing a lot of irregular games. It seems kind of odd, right? We've got the Thursday games. Now it's Sunday night. Like, we haven't played those kind of classic noon or even the 3:15 games in a little bit. But I'm feeling really good, feeling really optimistic going into Sunday Night Football, going in, playing a hot Seattle team that has a ton to play for. They're battling for division. Realistically, the Packers could theoretically clinch a playoff spot with a win and a little bit of help from in the Atlanta game. So, I would argue Seattle has more to play for, quote unquote, but the Packers have a lot to play for too, right? Like, it's that time of year where you just got to win ball games. And this is a week where I want to see the Packers go on the road and put it together, because if they can't do it on the road now, they're going to have a heck of a time come playoff time, right? This is a tough division. We're not going to have home games. So I'm really optimistic. I'm really excited. I'm excited to break down the game with you today.
Yeah, I think that is a little bit of storyline. I'm glad you touched on that. The Seahawks are fighting to retain the top spot in the NFC West. So this is a big game for them at home. And I'm not going to say a must-win game for Seattle, but certainly a much bigger game, I think, when you're looking at the records and where things stand for the Seahawks than it is for the Packers. Packers, realistically, just by one or two wins here down the stretch. Certainly we want them to start playing good football and win every game we can. But I think this is going to be an identity game for the Packers. And that's really what I'm looking for, Dane, is you said it. Seattle's a hot team. Packers have some guys coming back from health, a couple. It looks like Jair Alexander and Javon Bullard are not going to be going, and certainly Luke Musgrave is still ramping up, but right around the corner, hopefully, for his return as well. So I think the Packers are relatively healthier heading into this game than they've been in a couple of weeks. They've been pretty healthy all season, to be honest, Dane. But I think certainly I would love to see the Packers go out, establish things in the front like they've been doing, and certainly continue to just have that identity of running the football, and that's going to set them up for success regardless of the outcome of this one.
Yeah. You mentioned Jair Alexander. I mean, we've got a ton of guys coming back, right? You said, I mean, Romeo Doubs is back from a concussion protocol. Evan Williams going to be back at safety. Bullard injury is definitely something that we're circling. I assume Keyshawn Nixon's going to be moving into slot this week to kind of balance that out a little bit. We're going to have then Valentine on one side and Stokes probably going to be playing. I mean, this is going to be something where the Packers are triaging a little bit. But I got to ask about Jair Alexander at the top here with the injury. Another week with him in here. I mean, it seems like this is a common thread going forward: is will he, won't he play? And whenever it's a will he, won't he, it very often seems Jair just isn't going to go. So, at this point, how are you feeling about the situation? Do you think Jair is going to be ready for the stretch run when we need him most? Or is this something where this Packers defense is just going to need to assume that he won't be out there, and it's a bonus if he is out there?
He was a full participant in practice 2 days this week, and it sounds like he just wasn't really showing that he was all the way back. And so they just decided to shut him down Friday. It was not a setback or a re-injury from what LaFleur said. So that's the good news. So You know what, Dane? We've dealt with this with Ja and some of his injuries in the past few seasons, and as far as I have a little less concern about this one at this point in time. If he's not able to go a week from now, I think we can have a little bit of a different conversation. I would really like to see him get back out on the field for the last 3 regular season games. I don't want a situation where this drags out to week 18, or God forbid, he's not coming back until the first, playoff game. And that's a tough situation to put any player into. And certainly whenever Ja's healthy, we're going to put him out on the football field. But I think as a defensive unit, it's important to have all of your guys out there. Communication in the back end, we've seen that time and time again, is paramount. Obviously, John's a big piece of what we do, and he's a veteran player, but that doesn't mean that all of the guys around him are going to be locked in and aligned if they are playing football with him for multiple stretches of the season. Frankly, I thought when he was healthy this season, he's been playing some of his best football in years. He can help this team if he can get it back out there. And I think this is a week that maybe they're just based on the medical staff's opinion and just in the coaching staff and Ja himself evaluating realistically. You're not 100% yet. Let's not push this, have a risk of another setback like we did a few weeks back in Chicago. Let's get you all the way back so that we're confident that we can have a fully healthy Jaire Alexander for this stretch run versus risking, even if it's a slight risk of a setback, if he's 95% healthy. And then all of a sudden he's not available for this stretch run. So I know it's frustrating, Dane, and I've expressed frustration in other situations, particularly last season with what was going on with Jaire Alexander. But I think they're really trying to do it the right way, despite the history, and the history might be coloring some of the frustration from Packer fans' perspective.
No, that's good. I mean, I think that's a good perspective from you. And he has, by all appearances, been like a model teammate this year. He really has. He seems like somebody that's really bought into the organization and what Hafley and what LaFleur is doing. And that's honestly, it's a credit to Jaire. It's a credit to Matt LaFleur, who, this year's dealt with some Romeo Doubs issues and Jaire last year. And these guys, have bought in, I think, largely to the organization. So that's the positive here. What do you make of Kenneth Walker, the stud running back for Seattle, not going? We're talking about Packer injuries, but that's a big one, I think, for Seattle. He's had some injury issues for them over the years. They've got a good backup, but Walker's been a really good running back, and I think that's just a little bit less of a load. I mean, he's doubtful going into this game, and I think that's a huge boost for this Packers defense.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's always helpful, I guess, if you're playing the injury game that they don't have their starting running back. However, Zach Charbonnet looked pretty good out there carrying the load last week. So next man in, the Packers are going to have to be prepared. Is a slightly different type of running back, and I think we're going to still get a physical Seattle running game. And certainly they're going to try to set that up for their play action. They've got some pretty good weapons on the outside at receiver as well, that they can hurt you both vertically and I think across the middle. It's going to be interesting to see. One of the guys that we didn't mention that should be back this week is Edwin Cooper. And I think he's proven early in his young career that he is probably the best cover linebacker that the Packers have. And so it'll be interesting to see how much work he's ready for this week. And if he is someone that can kind of mirror Charbonnet coming out of the backfield, because he is a threat. He's someone that can certainly stretch the field horizontally as well. So that's going to be a little bit of a different challenge that the Packers will have to be ready for. Now, Geno Smith at quarterback for Seattle, he's been up and down certainly, but he's most comfortable when the Seahawks are able to find some of that rhythm on the ground and he can get into that play action game. He's not someone that's really going to hurt you with his legs all that much. I mean, certainly he can move a little bit, but I think the Packers, if they're able to slow down this rush attack for Seattle and keep them in check, that could be a significant advantage in this one, is to make Geno have to throw and throw a lot. I mean, he's proven he can do it if he gets hot. However, I think he can also give the football away a little bit in those situations. And the Packers, as a secondary, have been pretty opportunistic, maybe not quite to the effect that they were early this season. But I think that's the play script, is let's see if we can try to slow this rushing attack down. And certainly, as much as I said, it's next man in, it is an impact when you take a physical runner like Kenneth Walker, the third, out of the equation.
Wags, so what does this tell you? I'm looking at some stats here, and Geno Smith looks like thrown 7 interceptions. There's 6 interceptions in his last 7 games. Somebody that it looks like he's leading the league and with 10 interceptions when under pressure. Somebody that, yes, he can throw touchdowns in bunches. He's got 3 outside receivers that can throw, but with the pressures, I mean, is this a week where this Packers pass rush that has been up and down just needs to get after it? I mean, I'm looking at the weather report. It's going to be in the 40s. It's going to rain in the second half. I mean, this is a week where I think the Packers need to get up on the score, and we need our pass rushers to be able to get home and force Geno Smith to turn that ball over. Am I misreading it? I mean, sometimes it's just simple, right? And Geno has been good, but like, this is a simple week where it's like pressure Geno Smith. I think we win the football game.
Right, and Seattle's in the bottom 10 in the league in quarterback pressures and sacks allowed. It'll be interesting to see, because we expected that script against the Bears a few weeks back, and then the Bears just honestly controlled some of the things offensively with that short passing game. And so teams since then have tinkered and tried that. I think the Packers have made some pretty good adjustments to be, better able to respond to that type of, offensive play. But does Seattle try to counter Green Bay's ability to get after Geno Smith by, running football and really trying to attack them in a short yardage passing game, at least to keep them off balance early in this game, maybe control the tempo, keep Green Bay's offense off the field, and try to wear out this defense a little bit. And then they do have some of that deep passing ability. So if I'm Seattle, I'm really looking at that Bears game script a few weeks ago and seeing if there's some things that I can take from that and apply to my offensive attack against this Green Bay Packer defense. And then I think, honestly, that Seattle has a more dangerous vertical threat on both sides with DK Metcalf, obviously, and then Jackson Smith and Big Ba. I can't pronounce his name. I'm sorry.
JSN.
Thank you. And so they've got guys that the Bears, frankly, we talked about some of the Bears' weapons too, but they're just not at the same point, I think, with Caleb Williams here in his rookie season. So if I'm Seattle, that's really, I think, the game script I'm looking for to be successful against this Green Bay defense.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that they're going to be looking Eric Stokes' way an awful lot. That's just my guess. I think that Carrington Valentine's really coming on. He's still kind of in a rotation, although this week I don't think there's going to be able to be afforded the ability to do a rotation. We're just a little thin with the Jair and the Bullard injuries, so I do think that Stokes and Valentine are both going to be out there at the same time. And if I'm Seattle, I'm circling Stokes, who has been unable, I would say, to come back to his rookie form here in year 4. Just the injury, I think, a symptom of something here. So it's a big week for him, I think, for Eric Stokes to be able to stick and be sticky and make some plays. And all the more reason, right, that this pass rush from the Packers are going to need to be able to get home, because if they're not able to, I think it could potentially be a pretty long day for Stokes in this defensive backfield.
Dane, I've got a question for you. We've seen Quay Walker start to play some better football these last few weeks, and seems more comfortable. It seems like they're finding ways to allow him to pressure the quarterback a little bit more, something that we both were looking for a few earlier in the season. So they figured out how, I think, to deploy Quay in a way that he's playing much better football than he was earlier this season. And now we've got Edwin Cooper coming back. Talk to me about what maybe we can expect and how these guys might be able to complement each other. I don't know how many snaps we get with Edwin Cooper, but is there some different things that we'll be able to unleash now with potentially both of these guys out on the football field? Now, they played together, but Cooper ramping up his snaps, I think, early in the season, and Quay's like underperformance, and then overlapping now with Cooper's injury. So what are your expectations? And this is kind of an exciting development, I think, in my mind.
Yeah, my expectations are fairly high. I've been kind of watching Quay. We all have, right? We've been watching him develop, and you're right. I mean, the last 3 to 4 weeks, Quay Walker's looked like a very different linebacker than he had for, frankly, the last year and a half, especially this season. Like he looks more instinctive. He looks like he's trusting himself a little bit more. And Quay admitted to himself that, he was thinking too much. He wasn't reacting. He wasn't trusting himself. And now he's doing that. Bringing Edwin Cooper in there. Now, all of a sudden, the Packers, I would argue, have 2 extremely athletic linebackers that can run sideline to sideline and that can just kind of be physical and do the things that they need to do. So Wags, last week and the last couple of weeks, Quay Walker's been able to get a lot of pressure on the quarterback. That's something you and I have been calling on since he was drafted, that we thought that he could be utilized a little bit more as a pass rusher. And I think that that's something that the Packers are unlocking. And I think that we're going to see even more of that now with somebody like Cooper next to him. With all due respect to Isaiah McDuffie, who I think has played really good football. He's a solid linebacker. He's somebody that, he's a tackle machine. He's a guy that's in there. His game is not sticking with tight ends that are athletic tight ends or sticking with athletic running backs out of the backfield. That's just not something he's going to be able to do. That's a limitation of his, right? Bringing back Cooper, I think, opens up the door for somebody like Quay Walker to be able to rush the passer a little bit more, because his running mate in Edwin Cooper is going to be able to do some of that work that I'm not sure Isaiah McDuffie's able to do, right? So, and vice versa. I think Cooper, physical linebacker, somebody that is not afraid to stick his nose in there, and I think can also get after the quarterback. They're going to allow him to be able to get after it a little bit more, knowing that Quay Walker's on the back end being able to be helpful, right? So I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. I'm sure that Cooper's going to get worked back in. He's not going to get a full extent of snaps this week. I expect Isaiah McDuffie still to be out there, especially maybe in some early downs. But man, Wags, it opens it up, and I think that we're starting to potentially see what I think the Packers saw when they drafted Quay Walker and when they drafted Cooper this year of what could be. We're just starting to see the fire start to build on this one, right? And I'm hopeful that we can continue it, because it's all about getting hot at the right time. And I think that this week we're going to see a sprinkling of Cooper, but man, Wags, going into week 17, week 18, and knock on wood, the playoffs, it would sure be nice to see those two be able to feed off each other, because I think it just adds another dynamic to Hafley's defense if they're both out there at the same time.
Absolutely. Dane, I think let's transition over to Packers offense against the Seattle defense. And maybe the story, again, sticking with the injury discussion and the matchups between these two units, is how beat up the Seattle secondary is coming into this game. And so I said at the top that Packers identity that this team has been building and truly, I think, is paramount to their success moving forward, is establishing that run game. And I believe it's still true this week. However, one of the things that I would love to ask you, Dane, is this a week that the Packers on offense can figure out what that balance is between having that run game established and really being able to be explosive and attack another team through the air? Because it seems like there's been some games where they've been trying to figure out what that balance is, and games that they've won that the offense maybe is handcuffing themselves just a little bit to what their explosiveness level is and what they can potentially get to. So is this a week, Dane, where we might see some of that balance, get maybe some run game going, but it doesn't have to necessarily be a 25 carry game, and it's going to be more of an opportunity, I think, maybe for Jordan Love to open some things up through the air.
It's a really good thing to highlight. And I see John Dorn said the offensive line's got their work cut out for them. I think we have one of the premier offensive lines in football in the NFL, our front five, when those guys are all firing on all cylinders. Wags, I'll start with this. Josh Jacobs back in 2022 with the Raiders had an all-time NFL performance against the Seattle defense. Now, some of the faces have changed as the NFL, that's what happens. But he had 303 all-purpose yards running and receiving against the Seattle team, including a kind of a walk-off home run touchdown to win the game for the Raiders. Josh Jacobs is going to get some touches this week. There's no doubt about it. And I think that he's had a lot of success against Seattle in the time that he's been able to play, obviously. But yes, I mean, this is a week with, I think that if they can open up the start with the run a little bit, move the needle a little bit, and the offensive line is going to be loud. That 12th man ain't no joke in Seattle. We all know that as Packer fans. But if the Packers can establish a run game a little bit early, the Seattle defense is prone to giving up some pretty big plays, I think, through the air. And this does feel like a week where the Packers could just blow the lid off a little bit of Seattle, but it starts, I think, up front running the ball and bouncing out from there. But yeah, Wags, this is a week where there is some pass rush. There is some stuff Seattle can do, and they're going to be loud. But I just think that it's a mismatch for Seattle's defense to be playing Green Bay Packers this week. I do. I think that we're going to run the ball, and I think we're going to be able to air it out and probably get some pretty big chunk plays against Seattle's defense, especially with the injuries they have.
Yeah. Does it behoove the Packers to think about speeding up the game against an opponent like Seattle, or is that a misread of this type of opponent?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, I want to hear your take on that too. I mean, I think part of it's going to be dictated by game flow a little bit, as far as, do the Packers start hot? Right. What does that look like? But I do think that this is a week where the Packers could theoretically start hot. I think that Josh Jacobs does get a healthy load to start the game. And I think that they're going to be looking then to open it up through the air and come down with some big plays. But yeah, I mean, it depends on how loud it's going to be. It's going to depend on some other factors, I think. But I think if the Packers, they've had success when they sped it up a little bit this year, right? And I think that's it's going to be important for them to be able to execute in the red zone and clean up the penalties a little bit. But yeah, this is a week where maybe speeding it up and getting the line of scrimmage and allowing Jordan to kind of scan the field and getting to the line could be helpful for this offense.
Yeah, I mean, tempo is an interesting thing. You wouldn't have thought that this would be the case, but last week against the Lions, it was pretty apparent that Detroit was trying to slow down the tempo in this game because of all the injuries that they had on the defensive side. And that kind of limited what Packers were able to do to get into a rhythm offensively early in the game. So if tempo is going to be a factor, I think it's really important that the Packers on the offensive side of football are executing in the first couple of possessions that they have and going down and putting points up the board. Now, that doesn't mean they need to score a touchdown in every possession that they have, but it's not a game you want to, play with your food, get behind early, and then all of a sudden you can turn it on in second half. I think this Seattle team offensively is good enough to be able to put some drives together and keep this Packer offense off the field, even if they do start to get hot and score quickly, like they did in the second half last week against Detroit. So it's an interesting balance, right, Dane, where certainly you have to respect the opposing offense too and how that affects your own defense. But if you really feel like you've got some advantages and the biggest mismatch in this game could be this Packer offense and passing attack against this Seattle beat up secondary. And they're not the strongest against the run either. So I do think you're right. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that we only give Josh Jacobs 10 touches this week. I'm just wondering if there's a faster tempo, more aggressive through the air earlier on and more often in this game to try to get some points up on the board and make Seattle be the one that's the one chasing.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's whenever we play Seattle, I swear, but especially like looking at this team right now, it's like more maybe than other weeks. It's the team. It's the elements because it's the rain and, it's always kind of the rain under the lights. And then it's that 12th man because they get so damn loud, right? So there's kind of these three things that we're competing with there. Good teams can win and take care of that. And it's not an issue. And I think this is a good team, but this is a statement week. So I think for the Packers, I would argue, this is me. I know this is out there. Everybody else is talking about last week with Detroit. This is like a huge week for the Packers. I thought it was an important week. They're all important. It would have been really nice for the Packers to go and win. But I was, I'm disappointed we didn't win, but the Packers fought back and did some stuff. This is a week where can you go beat a good team on the road? That's what they're going to need to do as this season, progresses and go in the playoffs. Can the Packers go into a hostile environment, travel across the country, beat a good team on the road that has a lot to play for? And that's the question mark. And that's what I want to see them answer this week.
Yeah. And they might have to do it against Seattle again come playoff time.
Exactly.
So we know that they might have to go through Detroit in the playoffs. And I think despite the loss, we have to feel pretty good about their ability they've proven that they can go in there and figure out how to win a game. So this week is another opportunity, and hopefully they can come out and put one on the left side of the win-loss column instead of on the right side. All right, Dane, let's get into some X factors and then we'll get to the score prediction. So folks, it looks like we have some X factors in the chat that have been popping up there. So get them in there if you haven't already. But Dane, I'm going to let you lead off this week. Who you got? Who's your first X factor in this one?
Wags, I'm going to go defense first. I'm going to go with Carrington Valentine, cornerback, is an X factor this week because I think that he's due for an interception. He's somebody that I think is really coming on strong and is going to get a ton of snaps this week. I think he's earned a ton of snaps. I think it's a thin secondary with the injuries. And of course, as we mentioned, Seattle's wide receivers are talented and they are aggressive. And I think Gino's going to try to air the ball out a little bit against Packers. So Carrington Valentine, I want to see him get a pick. I want to see him play ball the way that we know that he can and the way that he really has been able to play, especially over these last number of weeks. So Carrington Valentine's going to be my defensive X factor because they're throwing the ball and they're going to have to throw some Carrington's way. And I think that he's going to be able to be an impact player for the Packers defense this week.
All right. I'm going to stick with the guy I mentioned earlier, Quay Walker. And what I am looking for from an X factor standpoint is, can he continue to play at a high level? And he's had some opportunities, get his hands on the football. So I think like Carrington Valentine, Quay Walker is also overdue, whether that's an interception, forced fumble recovery. I'd love to see him be able to turn over this Seattle offense. And I think he might get some opportunities and certainly would love to see him continue to get some opportunities to make some plays, getting after the quarterback as he's done some nice delayed blitzes and really putting some pressure. That's where Quay Walker is at his best. And I think he's going to need to play at a high level this week against a Seattle offense that they're going to have a lot of guys buzzing around him. Whether across the middle or over the top, in the flat, Quay is going to have his head on a swivel, understand his assignments, and be in the right place on the field, not overthinking, as you said. And can he be reactive and come up with a big play and play at a high level again this week? If so, I really like Green Bay's chances in this one.
It's great. That's tremendous. You let me go first on defense. I want you to go first on offense. Who you got as your offensive X factor this week, Wags?
I'm going to go with Romeo Doubs. Last time he came off of missing, it was granted just one game. Romeo came back and scored 2 touchdowns. I think Romeo Dobbs, is someone that he hit kind of a little bit of a hot stretch after that 1-game suspension, starting with that 2-touchdown performance the following week. And he kept that going. Maybe not same touchdown production, but yards, catches. And I think Romeo, with his ability and precision route running, if he's all the way back healthy and gets his full complement of snaps this week, I think he is someone that can stretch this Seattle defense vertically across the middle, as well as open some things up for Jaden Reed underneath. So I think he has an impact not only in his ability to put up some production individually, but how he can complement and open some things up for some of his peers, particularly Jaden Reed and Tucker Kraft this week. So I like Romeo to have an X factor performance in this one.
So it's funny. Last week, Wags, you had 2 guys in your mind, and this week I had 2 guys with X Factor on my mind. Romeo was one of them, and I'm flipping the script. I'm going Jaden Reed this week. Jaden Reed, no catches last week. That's going to change. I think he's going to have a busy day. I love the Romeo Dobbs selection. I also love the Jaden Reed. Hell, they might both have some pretty big weeks this week, to be honest with you. I really like the matchup. So Jaden Reed is definitely going to get his targets. He's going to get some touches. I think that Matt LaFleur early on is going to get the ball in Jaden Reed's hands purposefully, and Jaden's going to be able to do some stuff and find some space on the field. So Jaden Reed's my X factor this week.
All right. I love it. Dane, score predictions. I'm never going to pick the Packers to lose. You said at the top, Seattle probably has more to play for in this one. I can't disagree with that, to be honest with you. I think the Packers match up pretty well against this Seahawks team. As you said, it's always tough to travel across the country, play on Sunday night in a hostile environment. So this is going to be a real test for the Packers. And my magic number is exactly what we see in the chat. Wayne has 31 for the Packers. If the Packers can score 30 or 31 points, I think they win this game. If this is a game that's in the 20s or even in the teens, I think that favors the Seahawks. That to me says that they've got control of the tempo. It's got grinded out type game. That's a situation the crowd can get involved. Maybe offensively, the Packers are not able to find a rhythm. Seahawks are getting after Jordan Love. So that's not a score or a tempo that I want to see. I want to see this be higher scoring. So if I'm going to pick a Packer victory, and I've got the Packers going into Seattle, putting up 34 and eking out a 34-28 win on Sunday night.
Man, I think you're spot. I think you're right. I mean, Wayne's got 31-29. Kevin's got in our chat as well 27-17. Wags, I hear you. I think it's gonna be it ain't gonna be pretty probably this week, this Sunday night. It's gonna be entertaining. I don't know if it's gonna be pretty. I really like your score projection, and I've got 30-27. Same reason. I think 30 is that number. I think the Packers hit that 30 plus mark again this week, and it's going to be nail biter. It's going to be, I think Seattle probably has the ball at the end of the game. The Packers defense has to make a stop. It's one of those types of games. So 30-27 is mine, but I couldn't disagree at all with what you're saying either. I do think the Packers probably need to clip 30 to win this football game.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, if we could get out of this game with the win, it's not going to really help us too much at this point, any wins we get with our seeding. But let's go ahead and just take care of business, lock up a playoff slot, maybe unofficially this week, but really be positioned to kind of to really take care of business, and then we can continue to focus on getting healthy and playing good football here down the stretch. So all right, I think that does it for this one. So folks, if you're out and about here Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, getting ready for Packer football, and you're listening to us, as always, we appreciate you. Be legendary and go Pack go.
Every year I know we gonna go hard. We been that team ever since Bart started. All my cheese heads go pack go. Ain't showing no mercy, cutting no slack, no. I ain't a bad sport and I'll even wish you good luck. Only thing I will